in this episode.
Crime thrillers, they're all about good and evil. And in history, when you're trying to explain to a classroom of 14-year-olds why Hitler did what he did, you really do have to delve into human nature. You know, there's loads of things published in the Lake District now, but it's just such an intriguing setting. Just little things like the traffic jams behind sheep. So that was freeing, but terrifying, because I just didn't know whether what I was doing would work.
And I'm sure many people listening to this podcast have experienced on some level PTSD. For anyone who's really struggling with it, try and write about it through one of your characters.
You were talking about your ABC technique and how you plan your day.
It lessens anxiety. I think anxiety is something that follows writers around, because writing 100,000 words is this huge mountain to climb when you're staring at a blank page. It's about planning, and I use it in everything. I use it with anything that I'm doing. And basically, A is...
Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we explore the inner game of writing and life and inspire you to start, finish, and publish your book. I'm Mark DeVoe, and in this episode, we have Mark Stay back on the podcast interviewing million seller Rachel Lynch. But before we dive in, I'd like to thank you all of our family of Experiments and wonderful patrons, subscribers, and Bestseller Academy members. And this week, our patron of the week is the lovely Penny Lorimer. Thank you so much, Penny, for subscribing to the podcast. And if you'd like to be like Penny and get over 100 hours of extra bonus content that's only exclusively available to our patrons, you pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. So folks, let's dive into this week's interview. Mark Stay interviewed the lovely Rachel Lynch, who grew up in Cumbria. So if you're a bit of a fan of the Lake District, you'll certainly enjoy this one. And she regularly hiked the fells from a young age. After studying history at the University of Lancaster, Rachel trained to become a teacher in London and only began writing full-time in 2016. So all you teachers out there, take note. Canelo signed her first 3 novels in the Kelly Porter series in 2018, and number 12 will be published this year. So to date, the series has sold over 1 million books. The Rich is Rachel's latest book and also her first standalone psychological thriller. And in this interview, Rachel shares, is Whydunit better than Whodunit? The difference between complex and classic PTSD in your characters, why provincial crime is absolutely exploding, and how Rachel slashed the time it took her to write her first draft from 1 year to just 6 weeks. So let's dive in and listen to Mark Stay chatting with absolutely lovely Rachel Lynch.
Rachel Lynch, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. A bit cold.
Well, yes, understandable. That time of year. But there's a wonderful new book out called The Rich, which has an azure blue swimming pool on the cover. So if you want to feel warm, folks, this is the book for you. Tell us about The Rich, because surely, Rachel, the wealthy have suffered enough. Why pick on them?
Well, it's lots of things. I mean, I know all authors are different, but my sort of process is that it starts with a grain of an idea. And it was literally a conversation about PTSD that started it. Now, I've talked about PTSD in my Kelly Porter series because one of the characters is a therapist. But it started from just sort of a thought, really. And the thing is that I wanted to set it in a privileged sort of setting, because that type of, the obsession with the mighty falling and the powerful and the rich getting away with things, to me, sort of seemed a more natural setting, because the stats in the book are true. The fact is that if you are a PTSD sufferer, complex PTSD, then unfortunately, the stats say that you are more likely to fall into those categories. And that just seemed to me to be crying out for somebody who was in the opposite position and not suffering from those drawbacks to be able to exploit it and manipulate it. And so that's where it came from. And then I live near Cambridge, so that seemed to me the perfect place to set it, because it's a very exclusive postcode. Housing is extremely expensive there. It's an old city, so it has that type of sort of ancient propriety about it as well. It's quite a small city, so the fact that Alex's client list is quite small and exclusive fits in with that too. And the fact that their lives cross over. So that's where it came from, really.
Excellent. You mentioned PTSD in categories. What just for the listeners, what are you talking about there specifically?
So classic PTSD is basically it comes from a specific incident. So we all hear it on the news. You know, it's mainly sort of discussed when talking about army veterans, for example. And they have been in situations, for example, close quarter battles or combat scenarios. And because of the nature of the experience, they suffer from flashbacks. Mm-hmm. And they're usually isolated incidents, and the attacks are usually related to an isolated incident. Right. Complex PTSD, which is more known about now because it's all over social media, but it's really a kind of new discussion point. And complex PTSD is more to do with people who have suffered traumatic events over a really long period of time. Right. So that includes things like displacement, war, and child abuse. And I chose that one, I think, because it's not really talked about as much.
Excellent stuff. The book opens with a grisly murder, and then we cut to Dr. Alex Moore, a mother having breakfast with her children. So you got this grisly opening and something really relatable and grounding. We love talking about openings on the podcast. Can you talk about that opening? Very often we find that as authors, we're rewriting openings again and again and again. Also, I noticed that you're switching between third person and first person, which is wonderful because we hear so many authors in the Academy going, am I allowed to do that? And it's great to see a best-selling author actually doing that. So talk about that contrast and that opening and switching point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I like to inject a bit of dark humour into all of my work. And that was completely on purpose. I think there's got that juxtaposition between a horrific murder and then somebody just going about their business. It also gives you a nice little taster of what the book's about and what, as a reader, you can expect in the rest of the book. And you know, openings, yeah, they've got to pack a punch in crime, haven't they? So, you know, rather than the slow build up, which you can get away with a sort of more of a classic psychological thriller, but this was kind of on the cusp of both. And so I had to start with something grisly. And then Alex going about her business really, you know, was about what's to come and how in control she is, but also how vulnerable she is as well, how normal she is. But then there's something there that's shakeable too. So straight away, my hope is that, you know, the reader would think there's something else going on here.
And did that opening change much during the writing process, or was it kind of set in stone from the beginning?
It was pretty much set in stone. I wanted the big event, you know, right from the very beginning, and then to go straight into normality, and then pick apart, you know, who may have done it, because a lot of my past work has been a bit more why done it. Rather than who done it. Right. And so this was I think this is the first one that I've actually done where you actually don't know until, I think it's the second to last chapter, isn't it?
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yes. Well, let's talk about that, because this is a standalone, which comes after an incredible run of D.I. Porter best-selling thrillers. What are the pros and cons of making that change? You're writing something new and it's standalone, it's fresh and exciting, but also you're kind of building the world from the ground up. Was it difficult? How did it come about?
Yeah, I found it really challenging. I'm so used to Kelly Porter, and I feel sort of, completely submerged in her world. And writing another Kelly Porter, it sounds a bit cliched, but it is like, going back to family, really, because, she's in book 6, she's this far through her backstory. In book 12, she's now this far through her story. So it really sort of is a continuation. And, I'm familiar with the process, I'm familiar with the rules. Police procedural is so different to psychological, thriller writing. But I just wanted to have a go, basically. And it was freeing. It was freeing and terrifying at the same time. Freeing in the sense that, I was doing something completely different, which was great. So I had to create all of these characters from nothing. There was no backstory to hold me back. So they weren't going out with that person, and they didn't have that coloured cat, and they weren't in that familiar setting. So that was freeing, but terrifying, because I just didn't know whether, what I was doing would work. I just tried to remind myself that this is, just try and have fun with it, and just go with instinct. And talking about, first person, third person, I usually write completely in third person. I'm in control. I'm the narrator. I'm the writer, and the reader knows what everybody is doing from my perspective. So this was, another new departure, having first person for Alex. And of course, straight away, that tells the reader that Alex is important. But why? And it enabled me to be much more wittier, I think, with her, because I could make her dialogue instant, because obviously she's saying it straight away. I didn't have all the fluff around it. So that was nice. And I really enjoyed it. And I'm writing a thriller now as well, which is, the next one that I've got sort of due. And I'm doing a similar thing. So I've got third person, but then I've got one character in first person. And it's fun. And, I think that's a sign of the times. There used to be quite rigid rules about what you could do. And now there's a huge debate about, well, are you allowed to do that? And it's quite nice, because actually you're allowed to do anything. Do you have traditional third person, or do you have close third person? And I kind of think that if it works, then it's allowed.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree. 100% agree. Now, coming back to D.I. Kelly Porter, like I say, 12 books now, I believe. What is it about Kelly that has kept you and the readers coming back for more? What is it about a character that you find that you can come back to again and again?
Yeah, it's been amazing. I remember when Dark Game was published back in January 2018, and it was my sort of debut with a proper publisher. They were small. We really didn't know, what the reception would be, and I think it's a combination of things. I think the Lake District is intriguing, and a really intriguing setting. And when I started, it wasn't really done much at all. There were a couple of self-published books out there about set in the Lake District. Now provincial crime has absolutely exploded. And I feel as though, I've got to run to keep up every time. There's loads of things published in the Lake District now, but it's just such an intriguing setting. Just little things like, the traffic jams behind sheep and mobile phones not working. And the mountains and the lakes are really your city, the potential to hide things and to get away with things, the transient working population in the hotels. It just cried out to me for crime. And I get messages, saying, oh, I'm not going to the Lake District now, with all that happening. So I think it's a combination of that, but also the biggest comments and feedback I get back on social media is about Kelly. You know, she's relatable. She's not that sort of you know, alcoholic, chain smoking copper, you know, with 1,000 problems. She's actually quite normal, and you know, she's got fairly normal problems, and you know, she struggles to fit in back in Cumbria because obviously she left. So there's intrigue there as well. She's got a dysfunctional family, which I think probably 90% of the population relate to. You know, she's in her mid-30s, so you know, she's not as positive and what bomb-proof as she was in her 20s. So there's a vulnerability there as well. You know, so I think the combination of those two things has just worked, and she's got such an amazing following. And every time a new Kelly comes out, you know, all the others get a boost, and I get messages from all over the world from people, you know, just telling me, when's the next one due out? And you know, they love her and her relationships, and I think it's important with Kelly to keep a real 50-50 balance between the crimes and her life. Somebody once said to me, yeah, all right, okay, I'm not really bothered about who dies this time, but I want to know what Kelly's doing with her kitchen. You know, this sort of thing. And from my own reading, you know, I really like to sort of get a sense of the characters. And I think that it doesn't really matter what she's investigating, you know, as long as the story about Kelly is authentic. She just keeps you know, maintaining this readership, and it's amazing. And after 12 books, I still love writing about that. And I can't see me stopping until they stop selling.
Well, we're having a kitchen installed in April, so I'm deeply, deeply invested in that as well. So I will be checking that out. And it clearly is a passion for you, because I'm looking at the publication order here. So in 2018, there were 3 books. 2019, there were 3 books. 2020, 2 books. You know, it's an amazing, you know, amazingly prolific. Tell us about your sort of working day, because I've heard it can be fairly chaotic as a writer. But I saw somewhere that you said that, I think this was post lockdown. You were talking about your ABC technique and how you plan your day. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I think I learned that when I was a teacher. So I started out life as a history teacher in London, and I think I was on a course, and basically it's about planning, and I've used it ever since, and I use it in everything. I use it with the kids, I use it with chores, I use it with anything that I'm doing. And basically, A is what needs doing now, like right now, in the next hour, or even today. B is what needs doing this week. And C is what needs doing like this month. Right. And I've just got so used to it now. It really works for me. And I think it lessens anxiety. I think anxiety is something that follows writers around, because writing 100,000 words is this huge mountain to climb when you're staring at a blank page and you tap in chapter 6 and you know you've got 54 more to go. And so this sort of arrangement, I think, calms me down and keeps me grounded. Mm-hmm. And it's true. If it's a B or a C, you really shouldn't be worrying about it today. I mean, obviously the B's and C's are going to turn into A's at some point, and you've got to admit that to yourself and be honest. You can't keep them B's and C's forever. But really just focusing on what needs doing now and just believing that you'll get there. Because I think it took, I mean, you mentioned the dependence earlier. It took me a year to write that. Now, for the first draft, it generally takes me about 6 weeks. Wow. And that doesn't mean that, it's in the bag, anything but. What it means is that at least it's on the page. And when I hooked up with my agent, I was lucky enough to meet Peter Bookman from the Ampersand Agency in 2017. He said to me, nothing is ever wasted. And it's so true. So true. my writing process is very much about just get the story down right from in here. His motto is instinct over intellect. And me being a teacher, I was very much, when I met him, I was very much a cerebral writer, making notes and making sure everything was perfect. And he changed that in me. Put your notes away, just write. So Dark Game was written in 4 weeks, just from, splurging onto the page, because everything can be sorted in edit.
Yeah.
And the edit is where my teacher head comes out and I'm just red penning. So I really enjoy it. I know some writers hate editorial. I really enjoy it because I'm red penning. I'm doing my teacher bit, which is great. It's a different part of my brain. I'm like, yeah, I can do this till the cows come home. It's the creative part that I find really tiring, really exhausting. But that ABC, it really works for me. And I've tried to get my husband to do it, and it's just a really clever, because these things are all psychological tricks, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're about calming you down and getting rid of the angst and the worry over that huge to-do list that you've got. So when I start now, I've got to just say to myself, you will do it. You will get to the end. But for today, just see if you can write 2 chapters. And that's my A.
Brilliant. Fantastic. I did see a quote as well. You said, if I thought about completing the novel every time I opened my computer, I'd never finish. The mountain is too high. I approach it like my character Kelly Porter would, climbing a peak in the Lake District one summit at a time. So that's fed through to Kelly as well. That's part of her character too, is it?
Yeah, there's lots of me and Kelly. I don't think writers can ever get away from their own backstory, because it's there, isn't it? So, when Peter said to me, nothing is ever wasted, this is why, I write about personal training. I write about this. There's lots of teachers in my work. There's lots of adolescents in my work. I've got an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old, so things like bullying, eating disorder, self-harm, not to trigger warning, not to sort of trigger any of your listeners, but those are the types of things that, I've lived through and they mean things to me. So, I think you do, write from your own experience, and that doesn't mean to say that it's true. So I have questions all the time, like, who's Johnny based on? Is that your husband? It's not that level at all. It's not that they're real in my life. It's just that, that's where my inspiration comes from. And I think, I love running. I've climbed loads of Whodunits in the Lake District. I adore the Lake District. I grew up there. And so having Kelly run up Place Fell with Johnny, even though I hate her because she does it in 35 minutes and I could never do that, I'm there. I'm on that track and I know where the streams are to fill your water bottle up. And, so that's the best job in the world, isn't it?
I saw, and you're not too shabby though, Rachel. I saw that you ran a 45-mile race in the Lake District, the Keswick to Barrow, and you were 5th. So that's not, I'd have collapsed after 5 miles. So you've done pretty well there. I mean,
that was a long time ago. I used to love long distance running back in the day. I'm a big believer now that, I'm in my 50s now, and I think my knees definitely deserve a break. And yes. I think, I prefer walking and going to the gym now. Kelly's not quite there yet. She's still got, life in her, which is fun for me because I can sort of, relive all those days through her.
It's vicarious, isn't it? Brilliant.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And going back as well, you're mentioning the kids as well. Again, listeners, if you look at the opening of The Rich, that breakfast scene with the kids there, all very relatable to kids we might know. Is fantastic. Can we go back to the dependents as well? Because as I understand it, I just want to go back to where it all started, because from what I've read, you've always written, but you wrote your first novel, The Dependents, in Buenos Aires. Can you tell us about that?
So my husband was in the army for 16 years and excuse me. So he'd been deployed to Afghanistan 2009, 2010. And I was left at home with 2 babies, as is the story of thousands of army spouses out there. And when he came back, we decided that we needed some fun. And so my husband studied Spanish and business at university, and he'd never used his languages. And so he applied for the job of defense attaché in Buenos Aires. It's actually a foreign office post. So we were, attached to the foreign office, whereas, Mike is actually military. And he could use his Spanish. And it was funny because he was actually on an exercise, and the call came through to me from his desk officer, and he said, does he want it? Because he needs to decide today. And I said, yes, he wants it.
How did that go down?
I know, yeah. Well, he didn't have a choice to do. So we ended up living in Buenos Aires for 2 years. And the way the Foreign Office works is that I was not allowed to work because of security reasons. And the children were at school by then. So I had all this time on my hands, the first time since having children. And I sat down to do what I'd always wanted to do, and actually complete a novel. And The Dependents was the product, and it is about 3 wives and how they each cope with their husbands being away on a deployment in Afghanistan. So it was very cathartic. It was very much coming from what I'd been through. But all 3 of the very, very different women, different ages, different ranks. Although all 3 are officers' wives, like I was, and so. Yeah, it was kind of, I suppose it was a personal journey, really.
Yeah.
An experiment, could I write a whole novel for a start? Because when you're just starting out, 100,000 words is crazy.
Yeah.
And would it be any good? It sold, I don't know, about 500 copies, something like that. It was published by a commercial publisher, so it wasn't taken on, traditionally. I didn't have a traditional deal at that point, and I didn't have an agent, and I had a lot to learn. But
you did it.
I did it, and I enjoyed it, and it taught me a lot. And the military community was really well received by the military community, and that meant the world to me. And then after that, I vowed to not do anything else until I got an agent.
Right. Okay. I was going to ask, what were the biggest lessons learned from that first novel? Because we often learn, it's such a steep learning curve, isn't it? So one was to get an agent, and also it sounds very different from the thrillers that you ended up writing as bestsellers. So was that a conscious decision to shift away from that?
Well, I wrote a lot of stories in that period, and I think I struggled with genre. So I think I learned a lot about why genre is important, and how, okay, yes, there are authors out there who can cross genres and pull it off, but for the main part, you really need to choose one. And The Dependents, the military genre, doesn't really sell massively. Was it a thriller? No, not really. It was more sort of a personal kind of epic. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And my favourite genre to read is crime thrillers, whether they be legal thrillers or psychological thrillers or horror. I like horror as well. And police procedurals. So I thought, and I was in awe of these people, the people that I read. And I thought, well, I'll just give it a go. And so that's when I created Kelly. And funnily enough, that's when I got the interest of an agent. And that email popping through was as a result of an agent reading Dark Games. So, clearly I'd found something that I was comfortable with. And I suspect that my history teaching really had a hand in this, because I'm a big believer that crime and thrillers, they're all about good and evil. Mm-hmm. And in history, when you're trying to explain to a classroom of 14-year-olds why Hitler did what he did, it's you really do have to delve into that human nature aspect of it. And there's good in all of us and there's bad in all of us. And some people, it tips over the edge and they're mostly bad. And some people, it goes the other way and they're mostly good. And why? Because brothers and sisters are different. Friends are different. People with the same upbringing are different. So that kind of, I think that's what attracts crime readers to crime as well, is that fascination with why some people do what they do. And of course I had to have a hero and she had to be a woman. So that's when, I started with Kelly.
Brilliant. Fantastic. What's coming next, Rachel? Because we've got The Rich, but we've also got Shared Remains, I believe is the next D.I. Kelly Porter. And then I saw recently Storm have a new psychological thriller coming from you. So is there anything you can tell us about that yet? Or is it all a bit top secret?
Well, it's all sort of embryonic at the minute. But I can tell you that it's a family. So it's a kind of sort of family drama. And ostensibly it is about 3 siblings who are called home to where they grew up for the reading of their father's will, who has passed away. And I think it is going to be more like The Rich than a Kelly. So it's more a privileged thriller, as they call them, rather than a procedural. Just because I love writing The Rich so much. So they are privileged. And obviously they all get up to no good. But that's really exciting. I'm so excited to be taken up by Storm. I'm absolutely thrilled to be working with Catherine Tuseg, who is brilliant. She's going to be my editor. So that's in the bag. And Shared Remains, Kelly 12, will be out in May. I'm going to carry on with Kelly.
Great.
And then I've also got another psychological thriller with Canelo, who published The Rich, which is going to be out in spring or summer 2025. So I'm working on that as well. It's not a sequel to The Rich, although a lot of readers have said that they want one.
Right, that's good.
Which is always possible. But it is a different set of characters. So yeah, just really exciting times, and I'm incredibly busy. I mean, you mentioned, the amount of books that I write a year earlier. I just got into that habit because when I was first signed with Canelo, they were digital first. So, digital consumers are a lot more demanding, time-wise than, traditional published books in bookshops. Of course, I'm in bookshops, but digital is where I started. And, there's a year between Kellys now, but you can't really leave it too long, and understandably, these readers want to know what's going on. So I just got into that habit. And now 3 books a year is where I'm comfortable.
Wow. Well,
so obviously this year is going to be for different publishers. So, that's going to be interesting. And I've got loads more stories in my head. I went to the Lake District for Christmas, and it always inspires me. When I go to, I might find somewhere that I've never been before, or might be on a walk where I see an interesting character. So that always inspires me. I'd like to set something else in the Lake District as well, maybe a new series. I don't know. But there's lots going on.
Fantastic. It really is. And there are millions of grateful readers out there, Rachel. So thanks so much for sparing the time to speak to us. I know how busy you are. And folks, The Rich is out there as well as the amazing D.I. Kelly Porter stories. And we didn't even talk about the Helen Scott military police books as well. You got those too. So folks, check out Rachel Lynch online. And until next time, Rachel, speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book? Quitting the day job? Becoming a best-selling author? Since 2016, we've interviewed and studied the advice of over 500 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 1 billion books. And in the Bestseller Academy, we've incorporated powerful and proven strategies for success, inspiring fiction and non-fiction authors just like you to reach new heights and write their best book ever. Ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, coaching, and the most inspiring and exclusive community of like-minded writers? Well, your bestseller dreams are just a click away. Join us today at bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. What an absolutely fantastic interview. And it was so fascinating listening to the differences between the PTSD types of classic and complex. It's something I didn't really fully understand before, but it kind of amazes me how authors go into incredible detail and, either through their own personal experiences or through their interest in it, they dive in and they learn so much more about a particular subject. And I'm sure many, many people listening to this podcast have experienced on some level PTSD. It's something that's become incredibly prevalent in terms of our understanding around it. And, if you have experienced that, then obviously it's an incredibly challenging thing that you maybe have had to gone through in your life. And I know for some people, it can be a real lifelong journey that they deal with PTSD. And I think for anyone who's really struggling with it, it might really be a good idea to try and write about it through one of your characters. Maybe you'll be able to kind of write out some of the experiences that you have through PTSD. And for people that have never experienced it, I think diving in and researching more about it can actually give you more of an understanding. And, writing a character around that is one of those things that it's important to interview and ask people about who have been through that. Or if you struggle with it yourself, I send you all my love. And it's one of those things that goes untalked about. A lot of people who deal with it, don't really share what they're going through. Maybe they don't fully understand it. Maybe they've never reached out and got help or therapy. So thank you to Rachel for really kind of opening our eyes to that. And actually, on that note, if you've ever written a character in a book, or maybe you've written a memoir about your own experience of PTSD, let me know how the experience of writing helped you, maybe what you learned through it, or maybe how it helped you heal a bit by expressing things on paper, because I really do believe that writing has this incredibly powerful healing touch, which we can't really put into words. I guess we kind of do put it into words, but do you know what I mean by that? It's like the idea that we can't really measure a change or measure a difference with all these experiences that we have. But we do know that when we sit down to write and we work through things through our words, it can really help shift things inside us and make us feel better. So please do share with me any stories you have around this, or if you know of someone who went through that process themselves. Pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/contact and drop me a note. I'd love to hear from you. So folks, I'd also like to say a big thank you to our team behind this podcast. As you may or may not know, it takes a lot of work to put these podcasts together each week. We have an amazing team, editors, audio magicians, and all kinds of great stuff that goes on social media. So thank you so much to Dave, to JD, our absolute star of the show, and Lisa as well. So thank you guys for all of your help in helping us put this together and bringing you this podcast each week. So big thank you to all of our team on the podcast. And if you enjoyed today's music on the show, check out Urban Myth Club. That's my music project on Spotify. You can also check out a video of today's episode on YouTube at Bestseller Experiment. And folks, we're on socials as well. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook at Bestseller Experiment, on X at Bestseller XP, Instagram, Threads, and Pinterest are also Bestseller XP. And if you'd like to get a copy of our weekly newsletter that comes out, please pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com and click on the newsletter tab. You can also get hold of me if you wanted to say hi and tell me about what's going on in your life. Just pop along to the contact button on that website. And finally, folks, if you want to write, habit of a lifetime, we've created something called the 200-word challenge. There are thousands of people doing this now. So pop along and see if you can get our first challenge 1, which is writing 200 words a day for 5 days consecutively. It's much, much more harder than you think. And to everyone out there who's in the middle of a novel, push through that muddy middle. For everyone thinking of starting a novel, just write those first words down. And if you're going to be finishing your novel this week, I want to send you massive congratulations. Whether it's your first or your 10th draft, it's absolutely massive accomplishment. So keep on pushing to that finish line of the end, folks. And talking of the end, it's the end of this week's podcast. And I'd like to say goodbye from Mark DeVoe, aka Bookmark. Goodbye.